Hi, I am Tavish Carduff here with my dad, Duffy Carduff, once again, and it is week 7, Values and Ideals. The question for this week is, do you spend the majority of your time doing things that you value? Think about if you did, how would you do things differently?
That's interesting. You always want to think you should do things differently, but you end up kind of doing what you do.
Cool during that we're talking about values and ideals on the day that you voted.
Yep, we studied the ballot and we had it all made out before we went. There's my ballot so that I knew what to do when I got there.
All right.
And we could zip right through it. But we had instructions on which judges to vote for and which ones not.
Instructions from whom?
The anti-abortion people telling all of the people that they recommended and endorsed for the election. That was the slate of people not to vote for.
I like that. It's probably good use of
it was really nice.
Someone else's research.
It was really nice of them to send us that.
Way to do your part, Dan.
Yes.
Do your part. Well,
So
when it's valuable to you, you show up, right?
And it is valuable, and we've voted in all the elections. Haven't missed one. That's a value.
That is a value.
Reading. Been reading a lot, and to me, that's a value. I probably do more of it than I should, but
It's one for me right now too. I'm kind of immersed in a book right now. So while reading, especially fiction, isn't a big value of mine lately, it really has been the last couple of weeks.
okay.
When we talk about values at our raw material, we're not just talking about the things that in your mind you calculate are important to you. We're talking about the ways that you spend your time. You mentioned reading. And reading is one, and you qualified it by saying maybe a little too much. There becomes a fine line with how much time we spend on something and whether it is valuable or not, or valuable to the people around us or not, right?
Right.
And then we have to get our values centered with the people that we live with. We've got to be beholden to our responsibilities and all those sorts of things. If we have those in mind, then values become a really useful tool. So
Okay.
let's hear just off your top
Well,
top list of values.
values. Well, family is definitely top of the list. Relationships. Like I said, reading. Music is high on the list
We know
of
that
things
one.
that I value.
Yes.
And exercise has certainly been lately.
How cool is that?
Well, that's the way things have to be.
And that's a big
I
shift.
certainly learned that, yeah.
Big shift in value.
It is.
So you may have realized its importance previously, right? You knew that exercise was important.
I knew, but I wasn't doing it.
Right. Weren't making it,
And it was,
wasn't making it onto your values list.
and that was dragging me down, and that's why I ended up in the hospital. So this is how I'm able to stay out of the hospital
Yeah.
and building my strength back up,
While you were
which is really important. I mean, it's use it or lose it, like I said before.
That's
And
true.
I intend to keep using it as long as I can.
While you were in the hospital, the value in our lives became centered around being at the hospital at different times. That was where we felt like our time was best used. And I mean, obviously you're sitting here today, so we can all feel really good. But
I sure appreciated it.
even
It
if you
was-
weren't, that time,
It was great seeing everybody all the time and knowing that the support that I had,
even when you didn't even know we were there.
even when I didn't even know you were there.
But, short term, that became the value, was being in your room at the hospital in the ICU every day. As you've come home, value shifts. So family is still high on the values list, but that, what we set aside from our daily values, when something important comes along, the values shift and change. All of a sudden, what's important to you gets reordered. And I think that's where values and ideals becomes really important, because we do shuffle our values on a regular basis, but we don't realize that we do it. So say it's the weekend and you thought you wanted to clean out your garage, but instead you did a whole bunch of fun stuff. Someone was in town that you didn't know. You hung out and it was great. And then on Monday you see your garage and you start judging yourself for not having cleaned the garage. You've forgotten the value that you got out of the stuff that you did. So you have to look at how you've spent your time. And if you've enjoyed the time you've spent, then it met with your values.
One thing I've learned is never look back. You can't go back and redo it. There's no reason to go back and question what happened, because there's nothing you can do about it. So enjoy what you got when you got it, and go with the flow.
But you carry that enjoyment through. So you don't have to go back and look, because you've already gathered the enjoyment from the thing.
Right.
A lot of people aren't set up that way.
But I'm not about to go back and question myself and say, this is what I should have done, because that can't happen now.
Because there's any number of things you always could have done.
Yeah, there's lots of those. And so move forward and do what you need to do next.
So ideal versus value, like in your mind, and we haven't talked about this ahead of time, so like how would you see the difference? And then
I'm not sure. What an ideal is it something in your head that you think is important? And then when it comes down to it, what you value is what you actually end up doing? That's how we separate it out. So value is where you would like to put your time and attention. It's what you want to be important and all those sorts of things. And then you have to really look at, where do you actually spend your time, and see, I value worrying about my weight or something like that. You wouldn't think that you do, but if you spend an inordinate amount of time worried about it, then that falls in the value category. Yeah.
Ideal is a whole different space where we imagine the best for every situation. And sometimes we confuse an ideal and a value. And I often use cleaning as a metaphor here, because the ideal that we would keep our kitchen clean all the time, right? That's an ideal. You imagine your kitchen sparkly and beautiful. The reality is you cook in it, you do things, you go through the day, walk through, set things down. So only every once in a while does the look of the kitchen hit that ideal. But sometimes we've trained ourselves to walk in, see it, and be disappointed that it's not meeting the ideal at the moment. Our value gets confused. We've used the kitchen for really cool things. It might not look the way it looks in our ideal picture, but that doesn't take into account everything that gets done in it.
Right.
So ideal is more the best we can imagine.
And the cooking and the eating is the value.
In that case, whatever it is that you do with that space when it's not in its ideal,
hang out and drink coffee,
also has value.
Read the paper.
Spill your chili.
That's not the ideal, or
no, but things like that happen.
Or anything of value at all.
Things like that happen. And when we can breathe through them, realize they happened, remember that they happened, and still hold the ideal space, still remember what's valuable, now we've moved through this without creating any what we call energetic debris, stuff that bothers you and makes you upset.
Energetic debris?
Energetic debris.
I'd never thought about that.
So you walk in, just in our own house, we'll use the kitchen. How often has mom in our lifetime walked in the kitchen and said, like, this place is a pit, or something like that? It doesn't matter what happened before that. She sees something out of place, and the mood has shifted, everything's onto something else, and it happens so subtly that we don't realize there's just a natural responsive trigger that keeps getting hit every time that ideal isn't being met.
Gotcha.
It's not conscious. We're not even aware. that this shifts. And then we see, why isn't it clean? We don't remember all of the cool things that we did. Instead of that, we only see a product that looks just less than.
The things that made it dirty.
Exactly. So that the differences between value and ideal a lot of the time are that we confuse them and we see ideals as our values. And when we do that, we set ourselves up to be disappointed over and over and over. You are a person that works hard to not set yourself up for disappointment ever.
No, I don't like it.
I knew this would be
I
a
don't
tough
need it.
week for you.
I don't quite, it's hard for me to relate, to tell you the truth.
I know it is. It's because this is what you do naturally, and it's what confuses you about other human beings.
And it does.
So remember in Resource Week when we talked about how our gifts, the things that we are actually good at, are things that we don't realize are gifts, and we expect them from other people when they don't have that capability. So this would be the area.
Gotcha.
You are such a bright side looker, always. I mean, you're like, okay, this is not working out here. Just how do we switch it over here? You're so good at doing that. So I liked.
And I don't want to dwell on things that aren't working. You just move forward and do the best with what you've got. And what didn't happen is done.
Yes.
So you just try and do it better the next time or as you progress. Now I see people questioning their decisions over and over and over and over and over and over again, and I just don't get it. I mean, it's hard. Like you said, it's hard for me to relate to that because I can't fathom how that is. I don't know why they do that.
But seeing that they do.
I do know that they do.
And seeing that, this would be one of the reasons why people come to you for sound advice. Because you are able to table shame, blame, emotion, and look at facts and look at, greater good and kind of put those things together naturally.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a skill set that you have.
I guess.
That I feel some gratitude that was passed my way a little bit as well. I value that ability. I also recognize the lack in other people and give grace.
I just have never quite understood it. Why would you want to go there?
Well, I don't think anybody wants to.
Well, but it's a choice. Everything's a choice.
I don't think
Isn't
it
it?
is. No. I mean,
Really?
I don't. Yes. I mean, the simple answer is yes. But the more complicated answer is that as soon as our emotions are stirred, reason goes out the window. So a reasoned choice is unavailable. So at any point where someone
Gotcha.
becomes emotional.
Yeah, that's when you lose it. And
So you reason way beyond emotion. You reason through emotion.
I guess so.
Which allows you to get to the bottom of mental questions and tasks, where somebody else might get hit by an emotional thing, and now the reasoning ability isn't there, which is why they will go back and question.
And the emotions dominating their thoughts.
Yes. So when those get out in front, that's when you see a reactive space, and you'll see someone unable to attach to something that they know.
Yeah.
When they're not emotional.
I never really thought about it.
So this is why values become important.
I
Because
guess so.
when we know our values, even when we're emotional, we can check in on the value system and say, I know how to prioritize what's happening here. We can find the space to breathe.
We can make this better.
We can let the emotion wash in, wash out. We feel it and it doesn't stick with that emotional debris. Otherwise, we find, this spot that now is tense, and the next time something makes us feel that same way again, we're just going to have that reaction over and over. And now we don't know why we're having it.
So the emotional debris just kind of clogs you up.
Exactly.
You got to purge it.
With breath. At our raw material, we ask people to make water a priority and to make breathing a priority by making them at the top of your value list.
Well, before going to the hospital, I never monitored my heartbeat or my breathing or my oxygen level or any of that stuff, and now I do it all the time. I check to make sure my oxygen level is up, make sure my heart rate is good. When exercising, I'll go a certain amount of time doing something, and then when I feel it elevated, I know to quit until my heart level goes back down, and then I can start back in again. And so that gets a little bit shorter time each time. But
Love hearing that.
these are things that I never ever even thought about or did before. I've got those things right in there, and I check them, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a day.
And what a shift in value.
Right.
You went from this time last year, that would have been nowhere on your value list. In fact,
Right.
it was
and it wasn't,
stay as far away as possible.
And that was much of the problem.
When we're paying attention to values, it tends to keep us on a path that has us doing the things that serve our passion and purpose. If you don't take care of those things, the universe will present a situation where you have to look at it.
Like you said, breathing. I mean, I never really thought about that at all, but then I had the issues and started learning how to breathe. You brought me that book, which I read, and it taught me to...
That came from our friend Katie Ward.
Well, that was great. But that's an excellent book. And so I practice that all the time, every day, and check my oxygen to make sure it's working. So, like you said, that's a huge value.
Increased value.
And something that keeps me running.
And the more you pay attention to that as a value, the better you get at
recognizing when it isn't happening.
Yeah, it's amazing when you start paying attention to what you actually are doing versus what you think you're doing or what you imagine that you're doing.
Right.
When we talk about imagination, though, the ideal playground, this space is super fun. And I'm sure you spend a lot of time there. You just don't call it this, and I'll explain it to you, and then you'll say,
okay.
Oh, yeah, I know that space. So the ideal playground is like lucid dreaming. It's, you know, all of the best possible things. Like if you want to be able to fly, you can fly in the ideal playground. You know, you can make anything be true. If you want world peace, imagine it in the ideal playground. What does it look like? If you want people to just all be joyful, imagine it in the ideal playground. So when you play around the ideal playground, you might play with something and decide this isn't really what I want. But you've imagined it. You've imagined all the possibilities so that you've gotten to really play around in it, try it on, and not have to make purchases, not have to stick it in your value system, but really flesh out what is important to you, what is valuable, especially for people with things like anxiety and fear. I think there's some measure of keeping yourself free of fear, or at least not creating the energy around bringing something like that in.
Know that people have issues with that.
Well, how about people who see themselves as sickly or weak or something like that? They bring those things in.
Victims.
I
mean, there's a lot of victims out there.
Well, victim of their own.
Well, they've perceived themselves being victims rather than participants in society. I mean, things always seem to go badly for many people.
Yes.
And
now, depending on how they started, and that's where the raw material comes in. You know, when you can take a look at those first 4 weeks and see how you were set up to work in the world, right? Mm-hmm. You had a pretty nice setup.
No question about it.
I mean, you came into a sweet, sweet deal. So there wasn't a lot for you to have to suffer other than of your own making. There are a lot of human beings out there who have to fight all those kinds of things too. And when that is present in the early life, now you're dealing with emotional triggers. And I think that's where you get into the difference with you not being able to understand what's gone on your value system has gotten to build on everything that you've known, which has been solid and good, except for your own choices.
Right.
The world just isn't set that way right now. So there's a lot of fear in the way. There's a lot of people realizing this is a huge Monopoly game and only so many people win at Monopoly.
Right.
So there's a lot more casualty in the world right now, with feelings and things like that than there was when you were growing up or when I was growing up. So that's why it's important to really change our thoughts and change where we put our mental energy. Because the more that we play around in that ideal playground, the more we imagine good things, the more we shift the weather to things that are a lot more positive and a lot less fearful.
I just read something the other day about Kurt Vonnegut, who's one of my all-time favorite people.
Yes.
And Kurt Vonnegut was going out to buy an envelope. And his wife said, "Why are you just getting one envelope? You have enough money, you can go buy a whole lot of envelopes and you won't have to do it again." He says, "But it's so much fun to just go buy an envelope and all the people you meet along the way. And it's an adventure." And that's really why we were put on this earth, was to fart around.
So value.
So
That, putting that
so
in,
farting around is
it's a value.
is why we're here, is according to Kurt Vonnegut,
And
and I like farting around, so I got to agree with the guys.
Yes. And that is a great example of building values that can work for you. So I want to thank you for being here once again.
Value fun.
Yes, you do.
Value fun.
Yeah, it's a good one.
People-
Joy, fun.
People don't put enough value in fun.
I agree. That's great advice.
We're here to fart around.
We are. And we will be back in 3 weeks to talk about aligning with intention, which is week number 11,
All right.
week before the last. We will see you next week for conflict. And until then, go ahead and make a list of what you value. Pay attention to how you spend your time. See how different they are. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.